Hey, Herkjan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Adam. Good to see you.
What was your first computer?
A ZX Spectrum.
Wow, which one?
48. 48 comes to mind. I don't know. 48 ZX Spectrum.
I have a t-shirt. With the rubber keys, right? With the rubber keys.
Yeah, with the rubber keys, yeah. I have a t-shirt that I bought on eBay with a ZX Spectrum logo on it that I wear sometimes. But it was just a game computer for me. I remember that the Z and the X on the keyboard were completely worn down because you had to to run in a game. You had to move your fingers on the Z and the X keys. Daley Thompson's Decathlon and School Days, and there were all these games you could play on the ZX Spectrum. It was just a game computer to me, and did a little bit of basic programming, but it was just for games.
Okay. And when you started programming, or did something more serious with your machine?
At school, I remember computer science class, Pascal, basic. At high school, it was a mandatory class we had to take in the 90s in South Africa. It was great. It was my very first introduction to programming at school.
Okay, in South Africa, where was it?
On the East Coast, Maritzburg. I grew up there. We moved there when I was 8 years old. And I lived there for 15 years and studied, and then went back to the Netherlands. So I had a 15-year period where I was in South Africa, where I was never really a programmer. I mean, I studied law at university there, and I was completely not computer focused at all, apart from using it as a word processor. And then ended up in a technical writing position when I got to the Netherlands after that 15 years because I needed a job. And then it was all technical writing from there for a long time, and gradually learning on the job programming and gradually giving training sessions and things like that. So I don't have a formal programming background at all.
And you enjoyed your time in South Africa?
Definitely. I mean, it was a very interesting time, of course. It was the 80s, early 90s, end of apartheid, free Mandela and all that, and political change. And, I was part of the student groups in support of the anti-apartheid movement. So it was already an interesting political time to be in.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were forced you were forced to use your computer properly. So you enjoyed the experience with programming, or was it just homework?
Well, it was fun, and it was way pre-Java, and for me, Java came into my life really when I was some years after coming back to the Netherlands. I'd been working as a technical writer, and I had different jobs. And at some point, I left the Netherlands and went to Vienna, where there was Coca-Cola, and they had these AS400 systems for doing bottling software. And I was writing documentation for this AS400 stuff. And then I saw that there was an ad for a job in Prague at Sun Microsystems, which I'd never heard of. In Java, which I'd never heard of. And they wanted people to write documentation for developers using NetBeans. And so I moved to Prague from Vienna. And
wait a second. So what I understood is, so you didn't enjoy programming at school, so it was interesting, but, was not that interesting. So you studied law, right, afterwards?
Yeah, right.
Then you moved back to Netherlands. Then you worked for Coca-Cola on AS400.
Yeah.
And then accidentally you saw Sun Microsystems ad.
Yes.
And
exactly.
then you had to write technical documentation with NetBeans about what?
About Java.
Okay.
Well, it really wasn't. It wasn't really. I mean, using NetBeans, it's getting started and installation and creating a new project, and you don't need to be a Java genius to. And that's the whole point of a tool like NetBeans. It's really. It is for people who are advanced Java developers, a tool like that, but it's also meant to be for people who are just starting. Mm-hmm. And so it's great to not have, to have the same kind of knowledge as those people do, because then you kind of write from that perspective. And I kind of learned Java as I was, writing about NetBeans. And then I was introduced to the whole open source community in about 2005 or 6 or something, by Ludo, who many people may know, Ludo Champenois, who's now at Google after being at Sun a long time as well.
And we had a nice podcast with him about Google App Engine. This is
Really?
quite a character. Yeah.
He was really he was the first person that said to me, like, I mean, I was just writing technical documentation about NetBeans, and there was a great team of writers working in Prague on NetBeans, all these expats, basically, a group of 5 or 6 people. And I'm still working with the guy who hired me, John Ceccarelli, who's now at Azul. He was the product manager for Azul Prime, which used to be called Zing. He's leading that PM role. So so he hired me in Prague, and so I was working there and kind of learned on the job. And then Ludo came over because he was on a team writing the Glassfish integration with NetBeans, and that was all done in the Sun office in the US. And they came over, and he saw how enthusiastic I was, and he said, you should really come over and talk at Java 1. And
Wait a second. When you joined Sun, when was it? Which year?
2004 or 5, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know the story about Ludo and me? You heard that? No?
Really? No. What's the story?
So actually, Ludo, there was a Birds of Feather. It was like a Java 1, Java 1 session with Glassfish, and I waited because I knew that Ludo is a Glassfish committer, and what I wanted to have is monitoring, so more observability for Java EE, because I run this stuff in production. I wanted to see what's going on, so I say, hey Ludo, what we need is a kind of a REST API, and so we can programmatically get the insights what the application is doing. And he said yes, and then I met him again. It's more like three weeks later, and it was done. And I say, Ludo, that's incredible. 3 weeks, like, I was on vacations. So so he hacked this down on vacations, and it worked perfectly. And this was actually nicely done, and I used it a lot. And even I think my Lightfish was like the observability solution was also based on that, on his vacations. So this was actually, Ludo is incredible. And he's really nice. We always had fun with him. This is what I like, great sense of humor.
Mm-hmm. There are so many people that we know over the last 20 years or so that you've kind of grown up with in the meantime in the community. It's incredible.
Yeah. And why I ask, because I tell you the story how I met you the first time. So this was maybe 2007, so it was 3 years later. So go on with Ludo and your enthusiasm and Sun. So what happened then?
Well, I mean, then you kind of came into the picture as well, because I met Tony Epler at NetBeans Day in Munich, and then...
this was later, way later.
Well, it's not... It seems around about the same time. It was a couple of years later, definitely. It was, and then you as well. We used to go and travel around to different universities and colleges and jugs together. I remember Poland, that trip in Poland.
Yeah, this was 5 years later. So what I can tell you is, I think it was one of the first Java 1s, because what happened at Java 1 Monday was the NetBeans Community Day.
Yeah, right.
And so I joined. And what I remember, you were jet lagged there, and there was like, there was like a, how to call it? Not a session, there were kind of a session, but you were not on stage, you were on the floor. So you were on the floor, and there were lots of people around you, and everyone said, hey, look, this is Hertjan. This is like, and you did something cool with NetBeans. I forgot what, but you introduced something really cool, like, transparent windows or whatever. So some crazy stuff. And I remember you just from the blogs, because I read, the Sun blogs and Java blogs back then, and you did lots of cool stuff with NetBeans. And this is why I met you the first time, but we didn't met, actually. You didn't knew me. I just, attended your session, and I was really, okay, this is the Hertjan. And everyone said, hey, look, this is Hertjan. This is, the same level like James Gosling, what I remember back then. Everyone was really excited about the Hertjan. And this was funny, because I wanted to know what you did at Sun back then. So you started to work for Sun US or from Sun Netherlands?
So we are talking now about the time between when I met Ludo and when
Yeah.
we were in Poland together, right?
Yeah, between
the
this.
years in
Poland
between
comes
that.
later because we need more time for Poland. This is crazy. But a similar story happened in Poland a few years ago. So I have to tell you this. But
Okay, I was working for Sun in Prague. I was an employee in Prague because all of NetBeans was developed in Prague, except for Ludo and Vince, who were in the US. But all development was in Prague because that's where NetBeans comes from. So I just took the train from Vienna to Prague, and I had a job interview and basically got drunk with with John Ceccarelli and his friends, and we went bowling, and I slept on his couch, and it was an amazing it was an amazing interview with him. And then
I can remember this. I can imagine. So you passed the interview, I guess, right? So,
I did pass the interview.
okay.
So yeah, but anyway, so then I joined and I just learned on the job, and I don't remember this. This is the thing. So I started blogging. That's the thing. So as I was learning about NetBeans, I started blogging, and I think a lot of people read my blog, and it was written very naively. It was written without any knowledge about anything, and that's maybe the best way to start, because then you can kind of track your learning curve, and people can follow your learning curve, because they start at the same place. I remember being very excited about Ant integration into NetBeans, that I could see all the nodes, all the targets in an Ant script, and then I could run each of them, and I could hook up those Ant targets into menu items in NetBeans. And, it's all really trivial things when you think about it in retrospect. But at the time, I was very excited about every new feature I would discover. I'd be very excited, and then I would write a new blog, and I pretty much wrote a blog a day. And it was never very infrequently very amazing, but it was all like things I was learning. And so then a lot of people started reading that blog, and I think that became quite useful. And I'm really sad that actually Oracle destroyed my blog after I left.
Really? This was my question. There is nothing left?
No. I mean, it's sad in a way, because Oracle could have thought, well, there's so much historical information around Java, because it was really valuable Java information, but so the guy I was working with reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking at your blog and we're going to kill it. And is there any reason to keep it? And, is there anything JavaScript related? And I said, yeah, there is JavaScript content. So I had to justify keeping my blog alive at Oracle after I left, not based on whether there was Java content, but based on whether there was JavaScript content. And I think my JavaScript content wasn't convincing enough, and so they just killed it. And there was just like 10 years or more of amazing, or not so amazing, but interesting discoveries in there that could have been useful.
And back then, the Sun employees were encouraged, or maybe even forced, to write blogs. So what I remember is everyone had a blog, and I really enjoyed that, because there were perspectives from different Sun engineers, and
exactly.
and they were on the road, and there was I remember one engineer blog. There was like a beautiful image from underground or subway. So there was very creative period. And even I forgot, this was Mike. I forgot his name. There was one guy who did the transition from Sun to Oracle, and then he stopped working for 1 year, and I think he picked his bicycle and drove across US, and he described everything what he did.
Tim Boudreau, wasn't it?
No, Tim. This was Mike something. We didn't know him. This was a high manager at Sun. But there was lots of really interesting and curious and fun blogs, which I really enjoyed the period. So this is why I read everything from Sun, because I traveled. I had to wait for for airplane or whatever. So I had on my mobile phone. It's okay. This is this and this, and I just read this. It was lots of interesting information. Even the Grizzly guy who blogged about glassfish from Canada with the grizzly bear, and was lots of crazy stuff, So what I remember.
And also, do you remember Roman Strobel?
Yeah, this is what he was crazy. I think he was like 2 million flight miles.
He used to blog a lot. He was amazing. He was very enthusiastic, and always at conferences. He was always there, and he was always excited, and he was a very inspiring guy for me, really. And I remember this one time that we went to a conference. It was probably Java 1, and he went to so there was the NetBeans booth, and then there was the Eclipse booth somewhere, and he went to the Eclipse booth and he changed all their folders and flyers from Eclipse to NetBeans. and it was like an amazing, and it ended up being this incredibly, like they didn't understand this was a joke. It was taken very seriously, and he was seriously reprimanded by all kinds of people, and it was almost like, Eclipse people were saying, well, he really should be sued, or he should have been arrested and taken
but
away.
He was really a fun guy, right? So this is you cannot take Roman seriously. He was really fun and,
Exactly.
and really dedicated. He was crazy. So he was like a blog machine. So, but what's interesting, we have a chat about that, and my first perspective is just reading your blogs and Roman blogs without knowing you, and the impact was huge because the impression is like the entire marketing department is blogging like crazy. So what's interesting is how little effort is actually necessary, to have an impact, because your blogs and Romans, they were like back then crazy, and everyone knows you still because of your blogs back then.
That's right. Yeah, it's true. I'd forgotten about that. But and also, if you do something over a very long period of time, like every single day, then it's inevitable. It has to have an impact. So it becomes something that you want to keep on doing just to sustain that pattern.
Yeah, exactly. You get accustomed to writing, and you think about this, and you become more and more efficient, right? It's also a trick. If you would like to be more efficient with documentation and writing, just write every day a little, and you get better.
But also it helps if you have a visual graphic tool like NetBeans. I mean, you make a few screenshots, you stick it into your blog, and around some new insight or something, and then at some point I really started learning the APIs. And that's
NetBeans, another thing which was great back then. What I remember is, there were releases, and I started with NetBeans, I would say 5, which was before 5. I didn't like NetBeans. 5 was my first NetBeans attempt to where I used it in production, and 6 was great release, and what I really enjoyed all the RC releases because someone created the not screenshots, the preview screens, how it's called if it loads, the load screen, how it's
how it's screen. A splash
screen, exactly. I forgot about this splash screen, and they were really the art I really enjoyed. So every release candidate was a different splash screen. Who did the splash screens, by the way? You know it?
Yes, I probably do. Leos Tronicek. He's an amazing graphic designer in Prague. He was on the NetBeans team. Yeah.
So back then, I blogged. NetBeans RC is there with this splash screen. This was and everyone enjoyed that. So this was actually a really fun time. And what I still enjoy by NetBeans is how integrated it is, actually, right?
Yeah,
so you download everything, and everything is there, and you can be productive from day one. Okay, so you work for Prague, and then in one point of time you become a huge proponent of RCP.
Yes, I know. And I found that much more interesting because at some point, you've kind of learned how the kind of the default reference implementation of the API works. And NetBeans IDE you could see as the reference implementation of its API. Yeah. And so then I learned about this API, and I discovered that there were all these companies who were using that API for their own desktop applications. Mm-hmm. And I ended up putting together a certification program, which had mixed results, but it was there, and I traveled a lot to companies. And really interesting places, finance, oil, all over the world. I was in Texas a bunch of times. I was in Norway at this kind of oil platform. I wasn't on the oil platform, but they were creating a training system for the people who go on boats to the oil platform, and they could monitor these people from the oil platform on land, on the system that was on the desktop in Swing on top of the NetBeans platform. And so there were all these really interesting use cases and different companies that I visited and training courses that I gave. And I just found the API fascinating. And then from that, I started learning about APIs in general. And I've been doing a lot of documentation work since that time on other projects using APIs. And I think APIs themselves and REST endpoints in general have become much more popular in the sense of, you have the headless SaaS platform alternatives that are out there. And so basically from that API starting point in NetBeans, I've really branched out to learning about other APIs, like in banking, kind of in the fintech world, you have all these payment APIs. So the whole API concept, I mean, and of course that wasn't REST, those weren't REST endpoints, those were APIs in a desktop platform, modular, and also the modular architecture. I really loved the whole, and still, the whole Jaroslav Tulach and the core team, the whole modular architecture, the whole design of the internals of NetBeans, which made it possible for us to move it to Apache. If it had been a monolithic system, we would never have been able to transition from Oracle to Apache. It would have been dead. It's the modularity that enabled us to move in stages from Oracle to Apache. So I've just enjoyed the whole process. And now in Apache, I think we're doing great. We're still getting the pieces together. We're still not in a perfect place. Maybe we will never be there, but it's working out quite well.
I had some interviews with or at the podcast. There was Victor Orozco, for instance. He was also, I don't know whether you know him. He's from he won the Duke Adventures Java 1, and he started actually with NetBeans RCP. And then Ken Vogel also mentioned you, and
yes.
AHEXFM podcast. Like, okay, we have to talk because we had some shared history. And
just 1 second. Let's go back to Ken Vogel. So the way I know Ken is because one idea that we had in NetBeans was we needed to set up NetBeans in education, and we wanted to reach out to professors and people at universities and have some kind of exchange of information between lecturers, between professors. So like training material from one university, make it available to another university or another college, because they're all training people to use NetBeans, right? Among other things, they have the initial, like when they're giving their Java courses at universities and colleges, and they're using NetBeans, they're all at least doing a couple of things that are exactly the same. They're showing students how to get started with NetBeans. And so all these different colleges and professors and whatever have these initial slides and training materials for getting started at least. I mean, and then getting further with it. And so the idea was, let's have them exchange information. And it worked to some extent, but I mean, there were never more than 5 or 6 people in the world who were interested in this at all. And Ken Vogel was one of them. But I was always surprised at how little enthusiasm there sometimes is. I mean, this is one example, but how little enthusiasm there sometimes is for getting involved in some kind of community-oriented work. Why wouldn't people want to share information with each other when you offer a platform for them to do that? It's surprising. I mean, also so now in the context of, NetBeans itself, there are so many people who are using the RCP, who are using the APIs, right? In banks, in whatever, fintech, wherever they are, they're using NetBeans as a platform for their own stuff. So, and they would like NetBeans to be better. So why don't they contribute to the NetBeans project? I had thought that once we had moved to Apache, we would have an avenue via Apache for people to be able to provide code. Because when we were in Oracle, people said, yeah, well, Oracle should fix that bug, right? This is a project that belongs to Oracle. There's a problem with NetBeans. Oracle has enough developers. It was never enough developers, but theoretically, Oracle should have enough developers to fix this bug. Now that we're in Apache, I would have thought that developers out there who know about the APIs, who have been using the APIs themselves, would be contributing code to NetBeans. But it's still basically the same group. It's grown slightly larger. There are more people involved. But I would have expected a flood at some point, maybe it's still coming, of code from, but at the same time, these corporate organizations, banks and whatever, are not that keen to share code with open source projects. So that continues to be the problem, I think.
Yeah, I can, for instance, give you another example where so I'm contributing some code not to NetBeans, to other projects because they were related to my work. But this is like, there's one project I'm working right now, so I contribute, 2 commits, and then it shifts completely to different projects. So there is for me, not enough time even to focus on one thing. So it's like, crazy world for me. And if I would stick, more time with NetBeans, then of course it is worth, because why I would contribute is, to make my future better. Because if I fix the bugs in NetBeans, I don't have to fork it. I can use it. But I would say the entry for me, is somehow high. If I don't have an Eclipse RCP project set up, I will at least need, 2 hours to understand how to contribute. And I think this is only interesting if I would create, a standalone plugin, or I have a concrete problem, something like this. Then of course. And what also happens, is maybe like how to call it, fashion-driven development, right? So Java is not fashionable these days. So and they say, okay, I would rather contribute to, I don't know, React or whatever is fashionable these days. React also not more svelte or whatever, and because back then, what I remember, I had a nonsensical, post about some server I just tried, and I got lots of requests. Can we help you with this? It didn't make any sense. Like, why would like to help me with this from all over the place? Because back then, the servers were fashionable. Everyone wanted to contribute. So I would say for Eclipse NetBeans RCP companies, actually they have to contribute, because with the contribution, it is cheaper for them, because the maintenance happens elsewhere. We have the entire platform. It is tested by the entire community. So the incentive of contribution is actually lowering the maintenance costs.
Yeah, I completely agree. On the one hand, there's a couple of factors as well that, for example, a lot of these NetBeans platform-based projects are more or less in maintenance mode in many companies, and there's more or less 2 or 3 people working on them anyway, et cetera, et cetera. And, those kinds of projects tend to be developed up by people doing 9-to-5 work rather than super strong open source contributors. But I want to make this a broader point, rather not NetBeans specific, but why do people not contribute as much as they could? And I think there are 2 things, 2 projects in general. I think there are 2 things. I think each project that wants contribution should have a list of about 20 very easy to fix bugs.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, I think every large organization making use of open source projects, like the Boeings and the Airbuses and etc., they should have, morally and ethically, an internal open source division.
Yeah, you are right. But this is ethics. I would say it should also be, cool that the developers become visible. The question is how Apache can do this, right? So they put it on the resume or somewhere, think, okay, I contributed to an Apache, I'm now Apache committer. Should be also some coolness factor associated with it, I would say.
Yeah, but also that these companies, and it's not just morally and ethically, but exactly as you're saying, to lower the cost of maintenance, large organizations with thousands of developers really should have a division, and not just random people, because I know all kinds of companies where there's like this random Java champion on their own. There's this random, not Java champion in the sense of Java, official Java champion, but there's somebody championing Java. But what every large organization with thousands of developers should have for their own health is an internal division devoted to open source development.
Yeah, and the justification, because you have to justify this to management.
Yeah,
my justification would be hiring process. So if we contribute to open source, then everyone sees that I committed something, and if someone contributes, we can hire him immediately, her or him, of course. Because why? Because it's already we see the quality of the code, and we can just without any risk hire someone. And even the work you did with the blogging, whatever, this was somehow also open source related, because you can blog about something. So if you have an open source department at a company, and it's easier to write articles, to be visible, and which is a very cheap marketing tool, I would say. So I'm completely with you. But maybe we should do this in a subsequent episode, because I would really like to cover our crazy ride through Poland.
Yeah, no, wait. I want to make one point on this as well, because all these companies are competing for developers.
Yeah,
every company is competing for developers, so this is the way to compete for them. To say, come work for us. We have an open source division where 1 day a week, the Google thing, you can work on an open source project. And that will make the company more attractive, because if you join a company and they only work on corporate specific internal stuff, then the things that you learn are very limited to those specific corporate things, right? But if they were to say, look, for 1 day a week, you can work on open source projects. We have a division, we have people to support you, we have training courses for open source projects, whatever, that makes the company more attractive for developers to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I see this. And by the way, I'm using now Visual Studio Code more than NetBeans with a simple explanation. So what happens to me, I need, a lots of editing, YAMLs, XML, whatever. So I fire up, 20 Visual Studio Codes and close them. And, but on my to-do list, I would like, to test the newest NetBeans, because I'm really curious. And what I noticed, NetBeans is crazy fast.
Oh.
So I'm using a Visual Studio Code, and it is a little bit laggy always. So it is fast enough, but a little bit laggy. And I fire up NetBeans just for fun with Maven, and the responsiveness was crazy. So to the audience, just try it. So, and I will try it again, and we'll use it in some projects. The problem right now is I'm working too many concurrent projects. So I have, opened, several windows. But if I would work on one project a little bit longer, I will use NetBeans for sure. I mean, the NetBeans the Maven integration is still unbeatable, I would say. Yeah. What I do with Visual Studio Code a lot, if you watch me, I'm, open the terminal and do the Maven from command line and just use the Visual Studio Code as an editor. In NetBeans, I always use, the build NetBeans button, because it was the, the standard Maven build behind the scenes. So I knew actually what NetBeans is using is a stock Maven. There is no magic behind the scenes. And it was beautifully synced with the editor. In Visual Studio Code, is like somehow, you have to wait until Eclipse starts behind the scenes, but it's good enough. So to the audience, just you should still try NetBeans. If you stick longer in a NetBeans, in a Maven project, it is really, really worth.
And one quick tip as well is that very recently, here's a sign of the opposite to what I was saying. Somebody contributed very recently a plugin for Markdown for NetBeans.
Oh, cool.
And the idea would be ultimately that this is integrated into the NetBeans source code. But right now it's a plugin. And it's somebody completely external to the usual suspects. And of course, it's not so exciting to say there's support for Markdown, because everyone supports Markdown. But NetBeans didn't support Markdown. So if you're using Markdown, it's got a GUI and things are synced, and there's code completion and things like that for Markdown.
Okay. Now, what was the reaction from Sun Microsystems to your work? Were you somehow recognized, or was it your rebel, activities? So, was it like they really valued your work with NetBeans, or you just?
I don't know. It's I can't remember exactly, but it's just something I did, and sometimes I was pretty critical. I remember JSR 296. Do you remember? JSR?
Yeah. This was 295 was binding, and the 296 was Swing Application App, right?
Yes, Swing Application Framework. So me on my own, working within Sun, started this. I'm not sure if I started it, but I was very upset about JSR 296. And which was developed by people at Sun, Josh Marinacci, other people. And so, it didn't make sense to me, because we already had a Swing application framework, which was the NetBeans platform. So I'm pretty sure people were not very happy with me in Sun. So, I used my blog to be critical about Sun as well. And it was partly possible because I wasn't blogging officially. I was just doing it on my own, and I just wrote things from my own opinion. So I'm not sure if it was always appreciated, what I was doing. But I think it benefited Sun. It was of big benefit to Sun to have people from inside blogging honestly and openly about their opinions, even critical ones.
Perfect. And then Oracle happened, right? So Sun was bought by Oracle. And what I remember, you still was the huge proponent of NetBeans. This was what I really value. It's like, okay, this is really interesting. You organized in Oracle Netherlands, NetBeans Days, I remember, which was really well attended by everyone. Yeah. So it was, so this I say, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I remember Oracle. I remember the NetBeans Days at Oracle Netherlands, and there were other people from Oracle were hanging around having a coffee or whatever. And they looked at me and they said, "Wow, these are developers? Like they had never seen developers before."
Yeah, this was a really great cafeteria in Oracle Netherlands. So I always bought the coffee there. So it was perfect. So I really enjoyed the entire experience there.
Yeah, I think it was just really interesting because Oracle has this Oracle user group concept, right? All these Oracle user groups around the world. And they're all doing Oracle things, and none of it was really. I really enjoyed the 10 years or so I spent at Oracle. It was a really interesting time, and I spent a lot of time pretending Oracle loves NetBeans, in the hope that Oracle would love NetBeans. I kept on saying yes, Oracle is very enthusiastic about NetBeans because I was constantly hoping that it would happen, that Oracle would be. And to some extent, it worked out because JDeveloper ended up being bootstrapped by NetBeans. So parts of NetBeans are built into JDeveloper. And also, there were all kinds of projects that were started that were based on or tangential to NetBeans. But NetBeans as such never really worked out in Oracle. And I'm really sad because I kept on hoping that they would see the value of having a development environment that everyone embraced, because JDeveloper is not widely embraced outside the Oracle ecosystem. It's just used by people doing things with Oracle. Like if you're not doing anything with Oracle, you will never touch JDeveloper. NetBeans was an opportunity for Oracle to reach out to the broader Java community and beyond. And in the end, there were just so few people working on it. And then the adoption declined in the community. And then Oracle said, well, there are not that many people using NetBeans. What should we do? And then I said, well, it could be because we as Oracle have decided that we shouldn't be investing very much in NetBeans. Yep. So, we moved all the developers to other places because we said, well, these developers are very smart. So this is the thing. So Oracle takes over Sun, gets these fantastic developers working on NetBeans. And then basically Oracle said, these are too smart developers to be working on something from which we earn no money. So we need to attach these people to projects that are more relevant to us. It's very logical. It's not a big secret. It's clear. This is what happened. And then gradually there were very few people left working on NetBeans, and bugs couldn't get fixed really, and features, NetBeans started lagging behind IntelliJ because we just couldn't keep up, because IntelliJ was commercially supported and NetBeans was supported by like a handful of random people whenever there was a new release. And so it was, but it was a good thing. Oracle could have said, we are stopping NetBeans. NetBeans, whatever, is the final release. This is the end. But instead, Oracle invested in transitioning NetBeans to Apache, which was a very expensive process.
What I have to say, right? Oracle was actually behaved better than expected with everything.
Yeah.
So, with Java, with NetBeans, they try not to kill too much, I would say. And OpenSolaris maybe was not that fortunate.
Well, I think Oracle identified that there were a couple of people like myself who would be able to, and also my management. I wasn't working on NetBeans anymore officially. I was working on JavaScript, this toolkit, Oracle JavaScript toolkit. And my manager, JB Brock, was very kind, and he gave me lots of time to work on this transition process. And there were people, and Dalibor from the Oracle side was involved in vetting the code, and we had to do all kinds of copyright checks. We had to do, and there were Oracle lawyers involved. A lot of time was spent by Oracle lawyers. A lot of time was spent by Dalibor, who could be working on other things on openJDK. Jaroslav Tulach, there was a team in NetBeans.
Do you know that Dalibor actually, in one point of time, created his own JVM? You know it?
Really?
Yeah. Coffee.
I did not know that.
This is how I met Dalibor Topic. I think this is what you know, right? Dalibor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't work for Sun back then or for Oracle. And I used Café in 2000. This was like a German implementation of virtual machine for embedded, and I blogged about that, and Dalibor commented. So this was actually he's a really technical guy. So yeah.
Yeah. No, but he was wonderful. I mean, it was a horrible process of about 3 or 4 years of checking, like every line of code had to be.
But you are a lawyer, so you had a good experience. You had a good connection to the lawyers, right?
That's right. But like you're completely correct. But so like it reminded me again of why I didn't become a lawyer.
Okay.
Because this is the key thing. Every line of code that Oracle donated to Apache, and the same thing with Glassfish to Eclipse Foundation. Every line of code. I mean, the Eclipse people, the Glassfish people in Oracle consulted with the NetBeans people in Oracle after we had made our transition, because they had to do the same thing when they moved to Eclipse with Glassfish. So every line of code that Oracle donated to Apache had to be written by somebody from Oracle. And it turned out there was lots of copy-pasted code from random places, and like reused code. But it would say in there, I found this code on this blog by somebody. But there wasn't a lot of this, but there were some places, or found on Stack Overflow, this little algorithm that was pasted into NetBeans somewhere. And then we would have to find this person and ask them for permission. And if we couldn't get permission, we would have to and that was like code from like 20 years ago, right? And also we had these algorithms that were checking whether the code that we thought was really by Oracle or by Sun. If it was by Sun, it was by Oracle, because Oracle bought Sun. That's okay. But if those people had left in the meantime, if they had worked for Sun and left Sun before Oracle acquired Sun, we would have to check with them if we could donate their code, really, if they were sure. Because we didn't want Oracle to...
Mission impossible almost, right? I mean, this is crazy.
And also all the images. So, for example, there's in the NetBeans toolbar, there are buttons for opening the Google Chrome browser, the Chrome browser, and on the button there is this Google logo. Mm-hmm. And Oracle was somehow using it without a problem, but Oracle can't donate that logo to Apache because it doesn't belong to Oracle.
Yeah.
So it's Google's logo. So we had to remove all these logos and images, and so it took. But because it was modular, we could do this. So we could say we will start with the platform. We will donate the platform first.
But actually, this is kudos to Oracle somehow, because they founded the entire process, and I mean, this is incredible. So I mean,
it's incredible.
Yeah,
it's incredible. It's incredible that we did this. If I had known in the beginning how difficult it would be, and how long it would take, and how frustrating, and I would have said, let's just kill NetBeans. I would have, if I had known. But if I had known that it was a finite process at the same time, I didn't know. Like in the middle, you don't know. In the middle, you think this is going to go on forever, and we have to stop at some point because, and we still haven't. It's not 100% complete because there are some C++ things that no one understands anymore. So there's also, like, everyone has left this traditional story. Everyone has left, and now we're donating this, and no one really understands it. And there are sequences that we have to rewrite that no one can rewrite.
But after this podcast, there will be, a whole queue of developers who would like to rewrite the old C++ code,
Well, I mean, I did, maybe. But, I did a session. There's a session on YouTube that I did at the Apache conference. It's called "How to Move Your Corporate Project to Apache," or something called 10 steps, 10 lessons about. And
kill it before. The last twist is kill it before it happens, right? This was the last.
Yeah, well, it's a very sad. It's a sad process. It's a very sad session because it's all about. It's very sad because it's every lesson is like one of the lessons is be aware that, like, in a process like this, in a donation process from a corporate to like Apache or whatever, there's always like one VP who enables this, right? So like in Oracle, there's this amazing VP, Bill Pataki, and without Bill Pataki, this would not have happened. So Bill Pataki is a VP in Oracle who said we should go for this, and he convinced the guy who went to Google, the main guy at Google now. So he convinced him we should do this. But in the meantime, he left, right? So this process of transition took years. So in the meantime, the corporate sponsor of the process left. And then at some point, you need to get someone to sign a contract that actually hands over the code to Apache. But there's no one left in Oracle who remembers that we were working on this process.
Yeah.
And so no one owns this process anymore. So that's like one of the lessons that I have in this.
Do you remember an old enterprise project? And one guy got the assignment to evaluate Corba. And we moved on. And in one point of time, we asked what the guy's actually doing. And the guy, in one time, he set up a meeting and wanted, to present his results with the Corba. And then, the management said, okay, it's interesting, but we are not using, Corba anymore for a year. So it is pointless what you found out. And then he quit. This was interesting. So I was really stunned. Then actually, and one developer was completely forgotten by the company. He evaluated something which, no one could remember why. But exactly. Back to the more funny stuff. Because I could re-invite you back and talk a little bit more about now and Fuji, or what you do on Fuji. This would be great, because we have not enough time. But what I would really like to cover is, in 2009, I think we covered everything to 2009.
Yeah.
It was, I think 2009 was, you were still at Sun.
Yeah.
Right? And I was constantly invited to NetBeans World Tour. But a world tour for me is impossible, because I have clients. I cannot just, do a world tour. So what I can do is near somewhere. And the only thing which was left was Poland. And I said, okay, cool. I just check, the flight to Posen is no problem. It's like, 1 hour. And then you said, no problem, because we can take a car from Posen to Gdańsk, and we will handle for you. And you only need a flight back from Gdańsk to Munich or wherever. And so we did it. So we delivered the first stock in Posen. And by the way, I still get emails sometimes, the people remember you and us in the NetBeans World Tour, which was just a unique, this was like 2 hours talking. And I still know the developers come to me and say, look, back then there was on podcast, Lukas Lennart, he's maintainer from Struts 2 right now. He attended also the NetBeans World Tour.
Yes. I remember that, yeah. He's a friend of Karol Harrislak, who was the guy who was driving us, if you remember.
He was a kamikaze driver, the Karol. I said, we will never make it. He was like, he rent a BMW, whatever, and he was no full gas through entire Poland at night, what I remember. So, and we... So we delivered the first stock in Posen, which went well, as I remember, except you, of course, because your experiments with Linux never worked. So you never managed to connect, with HDMI. So I was pretty sure today it will never work, because you won't be able, to compile your Linux kernel in order to talk to me. So I was okay. Well, let's see what happens with Hertjan. And then it was pre-iPhone, and you had a kind of a smartphone. I don't know what it was, but there was not enough bandwidth to see where we are. So we only saw a line. It was blue or green, and you say we have to follow the green line, middle in Poland, middle nowhere. So and we drove from Posen to Gdańsk, and then I booked the hotel completely somewhere else. But I was so tired. I say I don't care. I will just cancel everything. I will stay with you that night. So there was Anton Apple, you, and Carol. And Anton started, I think, bioinformatics or whatever. So we had a conversation, about aging in the car. This was, the craziest, event ever. And in Danzig, we actually delivered, this was university, I remember. So you did your, NetBeans RCP. I did my enterprise stuff. And there was some Gradle, I remember, with Anton. And the professor wanted to talk with us. And this was the ride through Poland. And without, there's a kind of Google Maps. Because there was, and your, just hear you, just follow, the blue line. And the Carol went like crazy. So I remember we couldn't leave, Posen, because he always drove too fast. So we do 2 rounds around, the city, and then we moved, towards Danzig.
Yeah, it was like it was on the phone, and the Google Maps beneath the line was not there for some reason. And there was just the line without the map. And Karol Harrislak, he was now at JFrog, by the way. He was at Oracle a long time, and actually after the transition to Oracle, Carl worked on moving the NetBeans Windows system into JDeveloper. So if you have a very nice, snappy Windows and JDeveloper, it's thanks to Carl Harrislock, who is now a JFrog. But he was the kamikaze driver. and I didn't know him before that at all. But after that trip, we really knew each other really well. And I kept on, and I had this. It was like a game, like this phone in my hand, and he was just driving really fast. And then I would see that the line would go wrong because we'd gone past the current turnoff that we had to take.
But I was pretty convinced there would be a crash because I remember as he overtook other cars. They came, everyone was already, flashing at us, and he didn't care. He was like, the kamikaze driver, the taxi driver from the movie. He went, I don't know how fast, but it was always full gas with the BMW, right?
There's a significant part of the Java ecosystem that would not have happened if things had turned out the way they should.
This is true. And now I tell you what you probably don't know. So I was invited to the university again in Danzig. So I booked a flight, and I was on the airplane, and there was a discussion about microservices. It was maybe it was 8 years later or something like this. And now I hear, the pilot says, we have a problem, well, it's a very small one, because in Danzig there is a fog, and we cannot land in Danzig, but there is no problem. We can land in Posen. And I hit Posen again, right? So we landed in Posen. And it's like, there's no problem. Buses will come immediately, and we will pick by buses and drive to Danzig. And I said, I don't believe it that it can happen that fast because there was and then I asked at the airport, what's up? Where are the buses? And it's like, we don't even know whom to ask. Forget it. It takes hours. So I picked a taxi driver. This was from the last taxi driver in the queue, to arrange better price. And I see, drive me to Gdańsk, to Danzig. And he said, oh God, I never left Posen. It's like, don't care, go. And he had a small smartphone without a keyboard. And he said, Google, drive me to Danzig. And the phone, I don't understand, And I said, okay, I have a phone, don't care. I had Google Maps already. So this was like, with iPhone and everything, right? And we drove to Danzig, and the guy was afraid to drive fast. So it was exactly opposite of Karol. He drove like 80 with a car, and I say, why we drove so slow? And he say, drive so slow. It's like, because I have the taxi sign on the roof. I said, okay, but what's the deal with the taxi sign? It's like, this is magnetically attached. I cannot drive faster than 90, so we will lose it. It's like, okay, then just we will just store it in the trunk. But he was too afraid to leave, the main road, and because he didn't want it to cross, the straight line. So we had to wait until it ends, and it was a cemetery. So at the cemetery at night, we picked up the light, and this was the story like this. It was never-ending story. I came too late, but from the taxi there was the same prof, I think. We talked at the NetBeans day, and I dictated him what to do. To prepare the audience for my microservice talk. So he installed everything, installed the NetBeans and Java, and then I came in the last minute and delivered a talk about, with NetBeans, of course, and microservices with Java E. So almost, the history repeated. And back then, there was still fog. I had to rent a car, drive to Warsaw, and from Warsaw, I got a flight. So this was the story, 8 years later. With NetBeans, the same university, almost very similar situation.
Also a Polish driver, just like Karol.
But this was the opposite of Karol. No. Yeah. Great. What I would say, we should meet again, and we can have some discussion we're doing right now with Fuji, because you're still involved with Java, right?
That's right. Yeah, in a big way. And much bigger than I was in the last year.
Tell us very briefly, 1 minute, what you're doing right now, and I will re-invite you back.
Java.net 2.0.
Oh, very good.
So you remember Java.net? And Sun Microsystems, community platform for all things Java. We're doing the same thing with Fuji.
What is the URL?
Foojay, FOOJAY.io, and it stands for Friends of OpenJDK.
Ah.
So if you're using the OpenJDK in any way, Friends of OpenJDK. If you're a friend of OpenJDK, then you have tips and insights and blogs and podcasts and events. There's an events calendar. You want to see what the latest fixes are? We have all the latest fixes. There's quarterly releases. No one knows what's in there, but you can find all the information on Foojay.
Great. And you are on Twitter as well, right?
Yes.
What's the handle?
Foojay.io on Twitter. So
and your personal Twitter handle? Geert-Jan or something?
My personal Twitter handle, Geert-Jan W. GEERTJ.
And do you still have a blog? Now it's a little bit more secure? No.
Well, Foojay is where I blog.
So then, see you in future. So thank you. It was fun, to remember the old days.
It was.
Bye.